Welcome to the Holy Spirit's Curriculum of Joy podcast. My name is Wanaka Oberhuber, and I am your host. Today my guest is my sister Beatrice Martino. Hi.
Hi.
And our topic is going to be on using the performing arts to help with grief and dealing with when hardships come in life, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Beatrice wrote her master's thesis about it and performed in order to introduce this approach.
Yeah, I was looking at, I'm based in the United States, so I was kind of looking at how we approach death and grief in this country. And so I studied that extensively, and then as an intervention and kind of as a solution to some of the problems that I think we have, I built a gallery installation for grief processing. It had a lot of it had sound, it had visuals, video art projection, and I intended to have a performance in there as well, but I didn't. Unfortunately, it got closed right when COVID started, so I didn't get the opportunity to do that part of it. But I've been doing performances and choreography around these topics for a long time too. So basically all artistic approaches for healing and grief processing.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Would you like to tell us a little about how you did that and how you achieved this atmosphere in which healing could take place, and maybe some of the reactions of the people who were there?
Yeah. So I had access to this gallery at the university that was about 60 feet long and kind of wide, but it's a big rectangular shape. And, I could form it in any way that I wanted to. So I really wanted to create an atmosphere that felt safe and warm and welcoming and kind of outside of the hustle and bustle of the world. I'm in New York City, and the gallery was right on this very busy street in the middle of the city. So I wanted to make sure that when people came into the gallery, they felt like they were entering a different kind of space, a different world. So I covered the windows and I put fabric on the walls to kind of take away some of the more institutional feel of the space and make it feel more welcoming and home-like and just a warm space. And then I divided the gallery space into 3 sections with big dividing curtains. And at each, there's actually also the one curtain at the beginning of the space. In each section, there was kind of a different approach and a different piece that the audience could interact with. And along the way, I had text on the walls or on the curtains welcoming the audience person into the space. And there's text that said something to the effect of, this is a space that expects nothing of you. This is a safe space where you can cry, where you can rest, stay as long as you want. Your grief is welcome here. And different messaging depending on which room, but that was kind of the general idea, was really acknowledging that this was a space for grief really explicitly, but also making it really clear that I wanted this to be a space where they did not feel rushed or like they were expected to interact in any particular way, that they could really inhabit the space in the way that they wanted to. And the first interactive component that I placed was it was a bowl of water, and I got some paper that dissolves in water, and I cut it up into little pieces, and I wrote a little invitation for people to write down something that they needed to let go of. And that was really open to interpretation, whatever it is that you really feel like you need to release and let go of. And then they could put that paper in the water and stir it around, and it would dissolve away. And kind of the water would get more and more murky as more people participated. So you could also kind of see the the ephemeral remnants of other people's experiences, so you don't feel, you're not doing this alone, even if you're the only person in the space at that moment. And then the second space, I had an overhead projection projecting on the floor. It was circular, and it had a kind of kaleidoscopic, shadowy effect in the middle. And the text around the edge said something, if you're feeling grief in your body, walk with it. Your grief is welcome here. And I was hoping, and I don't, again, I don't know if people did this, but kind of my intention for that was that it would invite people to follow the circle, follow the movement of the circle on the floor, that they could kind of physically walk through whatever emotions that they're feeling. I find that physical embodiment and movement is really healing, and you can let go of things, and you can kind of get more grounded in your physical presence in a way that is really helpful and healing. So that was my invitation there. And then in the last room, which was a slightly bigger room, there were multiple things. I had a little wooden temple that I had built out of wooden boxes, and on projected onto it was a fire. So it was just something kind of a beautiful, semi-sacred visual that someone could just, listen to the sound of the fire and watch the wood that's not really burning, but it has the illusion of burning. And then I built 3 altars to 3 people that I lost in my life that are really significant to me. I've had actually, I think it's now 6 or 7 significant losses in the last 13 years. So it's a lot. But I chose to honor three people in an altar with, again, video projection, but also different items that represented, and photos and things that I felt acknowledged those 3 people. And those 3 people were, our father, Conrad Oberhuber, my grandma, so he died in 2007. In the middle, I had an altar to my grandmother, who just died about a year and a half ago in January of 2019. And then on the right side, I had an altar to an artist, and I kind of called her my adopted grandmother. She was very influential to me. She made a lot of work about death and about the body, and supported my artistic endeavors ever since I was a child. Her name is Joyce Cutler Shaw. And then the final, 2 more things. Sorry, it was very long. It's hard to verbally explain, but beyond that, I had hanging from the ceiling, kind of like a mobile. You can kind of imagine like a child's mobile, but it was much taller. It's very high ceiling, and there were these strings coming all the way down to the floor, so it would kind of be right in front of you, of a bunch of papers and notes, copies of pages of books that I'd read about death, copies of memorial service invitations or programs, poems about death and grief, my own personal reflections and notes of different emotions when I've been angry, or when I've been frustrated, or when I've been sad, or when I've been nostalgic or remembering. And I attached them all to these strings at different layers. So it was this messy thing fluttering in the wind. But if you spent some time with it, you could kind of read some reflections and maybe think about your own experience with grief. And then at the end of that room, I had built a tree. I took a bunch of dead branches from my neighborhood, and from trees in my neighborhood, especially after a really windy couple of days, and I attached them together with string and wire. Again, kind of more metaphorically representing how, when you lose something or go through something really hard, it feels like everything's fallen apart. But then you go through this process of having to reconstruct and reconnect and reattach and kind of build something new and build something beautiful out of these kind of shattered pieces, right? So I built this tree, which again was not a live tree because it was built out of these dead branches, but it kind of had this new form. And I attached string with little paper clips all along the tree, and again had a stack of papers and an invitation for people to write the name of someone they had lost, or a memory, or draw a picture, or anything that they wanted to kind of memorialize someone that they had lost and attach it to the tree, and so that the tree could gradually over time get these kind of leaves of remembrance, right, that people contribute. So that was kind of the full space. And then when you turn around and walked back right before the exit, there was a little closet area that was curtained off. It was a dark room with a single bench. And I projected a large image of a flickering candle on the floor. And I had audio in there where I told my own personal story of my father's illness and death, and kind of my experience of grief. And then the whole gallery space, I collaborated with a sound artist, Sam Cassetta, who's really lovely, and they put together this audio landscape of vocal sounds. So at the very beginning, it was just breathing. When with the water bowl where the paper can be dissolved, there was the sound of breathing, this kind of collective breathing, and kind of inviting people to breathe in the experience. And then as you gradually, in the circular room, one side had a minor chord and the other side had a major chord. So depending on where you were standing, you heard a slightly different sonic experience. It was spatialized. And in the final room, there's this really beautiful vocal kind of rising and falling composition. So that, I think, also contributed to creating a real space and spatialized feeling, that it was kind of a sacred space outside of time with these loops going, audio and visual. And yeah, it's hard, of course, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm visualizing it, but of course I don't know how my words would, how people will visualize it, how I explained it. But that was basically the setup. And then my intention for the performance was to have some physical and musical events that took place in different parts of the space, and kind of invited the audience to maybe experience the spaces a little bit differently because they were being activated by performance.
Wow.
So
yeah, that's beautiful. So is it like a type of going through stages of grieving, or what was these rooms sound like it's going ever deeper into the feelings and into the way things are, and then you go into your own personal story.
Yeah.
Which is really powerful, of course. And maybe you would like to tell your personal story here too.
Yeah. The stages, I think I was really building it to be stages of preparation, so that it was a gentle entering in to something that was very hard. And I think specifically, I think we all struggle with this, but specifically in this country, people do not want to talk about death. People do not want to talk about grief. There's this avoidance and this idea that it's kind of a taboo, and shove it aside, and there's a lot of discomfort. And so I wanted to kind of have a gentle preparatory experience into the space, so that by the time you got to really the deep and heavy things, you'd had a chance to acclimate and prepare, so that you're actually willing and ready and open to absorbing and processing and thinking about these really hard topics, right? And processing your own grief. So that was the idea that, at first the water dissolving was kind of the idea of, maybe getting rid of something intellectual, right? If there's something you're holding on intellectually to, let that dissolve. And then the physically, moving in a circle in the second room was, okay, now let's get into the body. And whatever, sometimes we're not even conscious of what we're holding on to, or what kind of roadblocks we might have to being open and experiencing. So I thought, okay, we'll get rid of the conscious thing with the water, and then we can just walk out whatever else is, stacked up, in our body. So then by the time you enter into the third room, and then finally the personal story, that you've released some of the things that might be getting in the way of really being open to the experience.
Yeah.
So
wow.
That was the intention there. Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. Our father died when I was 15, and well, he was diagnosed about 9 months before that, so it was kind of a quick turnaround. And also, so he had a brain tumor, and they did surgery, and we thought that they had removed the tumor, and they had gotten the biopsy results back, and it said benign. And so there was this moment of false hope where we thought, crisis averted, go back to
Yeah.
normal life. And then it was the shock when he fell down and had some internal bleeding in the garden and had to go back to the hospital. And when he was there, they decided to do a scan to see how everything was going with, in his brain, and discovered that in fact they had taken out the adjacent brain tissue, which of course was benign because it was just normal brain tissue. They had not gotten the tumor, and the tumor had grown. And at that point, it was really too late to do anything about it. Even though we tried and tried and tried. And really, we fought to the very end. He didn't go to hospice until a day, like less than 24 hours before he died, was when he got enrolled into hospice and actually was in the hospice building. So that's how close to the end we were all fighting.
Mm.
And yeah, for me, I think what was really hard, losing a parent at that young age, for one thing, there was nobody around me who understood. No one else my age had lost a parent or had suffered a significant loss like that. Everyone that I knew that had experienced losses were a lot older. And I really felt like I had no one to relate to. And beyond that, I also noticed, right at the beginning, people were very sympathetic and caring and supportive, but that disappeared really quickly. And I
Mm-hmm.
was in shock. I didn't know what to do. And I went back to school the next day, which in retrospect, I think later on, I realized that maybe that was not the right call. But in the moment, I didn't know what to do. And I needed to be active or do something because I didn't know how to process it. I was in shock. It was too much for me to take in. And I just went back to school and tried to go back to my life, to connect with people and to do the things that I love to do, to play music, to dance. And then when it finally hit me, or really started to settle in, and I really understand what had happened, people already had stopped caring, because it caught up to me a little bit later. And because I'd been going to school this whole time and had been doing all of the things, I think people misinterpreted that as me being okay and, not grieving or something, which again is totally illogical. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all. But by the time that I needed support and was really coming to terms with what had happened, the support was gone and the understanding was gone. And, I was struggling with my schoolwork, and I would tell my teachers, and they just responded with, well, life goes on, literally, like one of my teachers said that to me.
Mm.
And so I really kind of spiraled inwards. I didn't know how to express my grief. My mother was very outwardly emotional about it. And so I really felt like I had to be a stronghold for her.
Right.
And to take care of her through all of this. And so what happened was I put up walls. I was suffering internally, but never expressed it, and just tried to be kind of the stronghold and continue to do the things that I was supposed to be doing, stay with my obligations, all of that.
Right.
And so what ended up happening was I needed to express somewhere. I needed to process somewhere. And so I turned to my artistic practice. I did a lot of creative writing during that time. I had just started choreographing. Actually, the first piece that I ever choreographed was I performed at the hospital, in the courtyard of the hospital, when my father was in there. And the second piece that I ever choreographed was for his memorial service. So that became dance and writing, um, and just kind of artistic expression became the way for me to come to terms with all of the emotions that I was feeling. And it was the place where I think I didn't feel so alone anymore. And it was a way for me to express that was not, it felt safer. In some ways it was more vulnerable because when you make art, I think your whole heart comes out. But at the same time, because it's art, there's a little bit of a distance. Like I could make something, give it to someone and walk away and not have to, I don't know, get their immediate reaction or something like that. I don't know. There was something safe about it. That's a hard thing for me to explain, but
it makes sense to me.
yeah. So yeah. So then, I mean, my maternal grandfather died my freshman year in college. And then I had one of my best friends from high school, died like right after I graduated from college. He died. And then a month later, the artist that I mentioned before, Joyce Cutler Shaw, who had been an adopted grandmother and dear friend, died. And then yeah, right. Like I'd already experienced all of this death and had been making art about it. And I decided to go to graduate school to really kind of take the bull by the horns and learn about it and understand, okay, this has been my experience with grief. I've felt alienated. I've felt like there's not a lot of support from the people in the outside world or kind of the world in general. I felt this pressure to move on and get back to life really quickly and be okay really quickly. And I felt no space or no room to really feel the depths of the emotions and really kind of come to terms with what these losses meant to me. Mm-hmm. So I was curious, like, is this just me? Does everybody feel this way? If we all experience loss at some point or another, why do we feel alone? Like, why is there not a community? Why is that the experience? So I understand better what's going on and if I'm really alone in this experience. And yeah, and then after the first semester of grad school, I came home for winter break and was here as a caretaker for my grandmother for the last month of her life, and present for her death as well. So, and then it's so interesting. It's always like these like milestone moments in my life that I experience a loss, like in high school, which is this like very, early developmental moment, as a teenager, then right when I was starting college, then right when I was finishing college and kind of in that middle period. And then after the first semester of grad school, and then again, just as I was finishing writing my thesis, just 2 months ago, July 30th, another dear friend of ours died. So it's been, it's interesting. And I don't think there's any coincidences. And I think it's very interesting to see that in all of the like major transition points or developmental stages of my life, I've experienced a major loss. So
yeah, well, you didn't only lose people, you also were moving from country to country in your life.
Yeah.
So that must have had some precursors to the feelings you had when losses came.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't thought about that connection. But yeah, I was born in Vienna, Austria, and then lived there till I was 7, but we were always traveling. So, never really in one place for very long. Every weekend we were somewhere else. And then in Japan for 2 years, and then moved to the United States at age 10, I think, or 9. Yeah, there was a lot of movement in the early years. I mean, I think that's what made me kind of adaptable. I mean, despite, like I've experienced all these losses and it's been a very, challenging, but I think also I've been able to take these experiences and transform them into artistic practice. And now I really feel I identify as a grief activist. Like that's label I've come up with for myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I really want to spend the rest of my life making work about this and talking about this and helping other people about, come to terms with their own grief stories and find connection and community. So I think that adaptability and that way to like kind of take the shift and the challenge and turn it into something beautiful and something good. That might have also, come from having shifted so many times as a child. I had to make friends really quickly. I had to kind of get adjusted really quickly to new circumstances and find new things to get excited about and find, ways to entertain myself as a child, in a new environment.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see that as a positive thing.
Yeah. Another aspect of that is finding the power from within, right?
Right.
Because the outer world is always shifting.
Exactly.
There's no stability there.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. Even more so now than ever.
So what role has belief or religious or spiritual aspects had in all of this?
Yeah. I've really, I'm just thinking for a second, but yeah, I've really felt like, and it's such a cliche, and I don't like that it's a cliche, but the kind of that everything happens for a reason. And I have this faith, that no matter what happens in my life or what circumstances are thrown at me, that there's always that light at the end of the tunnel. There's always a reason for it. I'm always learning from it. And even if I don't see it in the moment, with some time after I go through it, I can look back and I can see, oh yes, that's where I grew in this way, or that's where I learned about this part of myself, or this part of my connection to the universe or to God. So I've always had this faith that things are going to turn out and things are coming together in the way that they're supposed to. And I know that, I don't know which great grandmother of ours it was, but I know, because my father always quoted her, but wie es ist recht. That was her mantra.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember which great grandmother it is, which side, but if it was the Polish one or the German one. But yeah, that was her statement about everything. And I mean, even now, my mother and I repeat it to ourselves all the time and to each other as a reminder. It's wie es ist recht. The way it is right. Things will come together the way that they're meant to come together.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that I feel very deeply in my core. And I sometimes have to remind myself of that when things really feel like they're falling apart. But it gets me through, and it gets me through to the other side. And every time, when I look back, I can see exactly, the moments where I met somebody because of whatever circumstance that led to the next thing, or that this suffering made me realize something, or made me make something, or made me connect to someone, right? Every little puzzle piece is important. And I don't believe there are any, coincidences. I think it's all, well, I don't know. The way that I explain it to some people sometimes is that I think, I think there are landmarks in our life that are meant to happen and will happen. And sometimes our path is meandery and we loop around and we make choices that make us go in strange and weird loopy directions. But I think no matter how much we loop, we're going to hit those moments and those marks and those people. That's how I kind of see, I don't know, like how life is set out for us, that we definitely have choice, but there's also things that are in place that are going to happen no matter what, because God has placed them there for us and has that purpose for us and has things for us to learn. And sometimes maybe we don't see them, but they still happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's one piece, I would say. The other piece is I I do feel connected to the people that I've lost.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it really depends on what their energy was like when they were alive. Like I feel very connected to my father and to my grandmother. And then there's some other, like my best friend from high school who was uh, not very spiritually inclined and kind of closed off. I don't feel as connected to him, which is interesting to me. So I kind of wonder about the connection between, their spiritual energy and mine and how that happened. It's really so hard to put into words, but I've definitely found that those people who I lost that I felt were more spiritually inclined in life, I feel more connected to after death.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like their presence is around and I can find it in different aspects of my own life. I can find it in nature. I can find it in things that I'm reading about or studying about or relationships that I'm having, right? That I hear them or see them in other people or in other contexts. And I'm reminded of their presence. Some of that is I think that they really truly are present. Some of that is I also think that every life has such an impact on, every person has such an impact on the people that they connect with, that whether they're alive or dead, those people carry some element of that person with them, right? Like even at the very superficial level, when I'm spending a lot of time with a specific friend, I'll start to notice that I start to use some of their mannerisms or some of their phrases because I've been spending a lot of time with them, right? We kind of adapt to each other and absorb each other's energies. And so I think it gets stronger when someone dies, that whatever piece that person gave to you before they died or in their relationship with you kind of lives on inside of you.
Right. Yeah.
So noticing that, I think, that was a more meandery answer. In my thesis and in my show, I very deliberately tried to not do too much related to religion or spirituality, mostly because I wanted to make something that was accessible to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want to limit it to any particular belief system or group of people. I wanted to really make this a kind of a universal offering.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't spent as much time articulating and thinking about the spiritual and the religious connection to all these topics. Of course, I have my own personal ones, but I haven't spent as much time, writing it down and thinking about it and really articulating it because it hasn't been as explicitly part of my research and my writing and my work.
Okay, so you chose literature that was psychological or more psychological or artistic, or what did you choose as literature for your thesis?
Yeah, I did a mix. I did a little bit of history and kind of sociological, philosophical perspective. I did a little bit of psychology and kind of social work and medical profession, things like that. And then I did a little bit of, I also looked at the genre of the grief memoir and how people have been writing about their own grief process, but kind of in a literary form.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, those were kind of the main. I looked a little bit of language use, but those were kind of the main research components. And then I also looked at, for my artistic work, I was looking at other artists and art practice to draw from as inspiration for form and content and approach. So those were kind of the main avenues.
Okay. So did you look into comparing various cultural backgrounds and how they react to grief or death or the like?
Yeah, that's what I want to do next. I did a tiny bit of that. I read this great book called From Here to Eternity by mortician Caitlin Dowritry, I think that's how she pronounces her last name, um, where she went around the world to different countries and different cultures and documented rituals and experiences of around death in these different cultures, and just from her own personal, just what did she see and hear, and what do the people there talk about, right?
Right.
As a comparison. And she wrote it. I mean, she's an American author, so she was writing it as a kind of a counterexample to U.S. culture, and saying, look at how intimate these other cultures are with death, and look at the way that they engage, and what can we learn from them. But I had to, it's such a huge topic. And I wanted to do everything, but I had to narrow down. And so I chose to just stick with Western, kind of European, the tradition of the European tradition, Western tradition that then came to the United States. And it's kind of the majority cultural experience here. Of course, in the United States, where, there's so many different cultural and religious perspectives as well. So that's a whole other thing to look into. So I kind of started with drawing upon my own perspective and my own background and my own cultural, traditions. What have I been brought up in, right? And like, what is my cultural and ethnic identity? And how does that relate to my experience here in the United States? And so that's kind of the perspective that I took. But I've been thinking a lot about PhD programs. I've been thinking a lot about what's next. And I feel like I just barely scratched the surface. I'm fascinated by other cultures and other countries and the ways that they approach death. And honestly, I think most of the world does it better. Because it's so much more ingrained in the fabric of life, and there's this intimacy, and there's this community aspect and traditions, and rituals, where people don't avoid the experience, right? It's like it's totally ingrained. So that to me is really beautiful and fascinating to see how different groups of people do that. So that's really what I want to dive into next and learn more about.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to look at there. And I studied cultural and social anthropology.
Right, yeah.
And so we also had some examples of that. And one of the things that I think is very helpful is the idea of these transition rituals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because in many cultures, there's this transition from child to grown up. And they have these rituals and these schools of how to get there.
Right.
And we have, in Western culture, have this whole long time of being a teenager.
Yeah.
Right? And there's really a ritual, and then after that you actually are a full member of the grown-up world. And it's a very intense experience.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's authors who and anthropologists who studied that very intensely and put up their perspective on it, how it goes through different phases. And I think the thing of death and dying and grief and so on, there's so many different ways that people are relating to that in various cultures. So so you will see it I don't think there's any better or lesser way of doing it, because we all need to go through the processes. But there certainly are head-on ways and ways that are avoiding it, right?
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, we as a world should be doing it one way. I certainly don't think there should be some kind of conformed way to do it. But I do think that I see a lot of negative consequences to the avoidance.
Absolutely.
And to the kind of disconnect and the alienation, and having to do it all by yourself in secret, and
Exactly. Yeah.
and in conjunction with like feeling this really high pressure to perform and succeed and be happy out in the world while you're like internally struggling. I think that is very, it's unhealthy, and the emotions get trapped and then
Yes.
kind of rear their heads at moments when, you know, it gets really tangled up and complicated. And I think that's, if there's a wrong way to do it, I'd say that's the wrong way to do it. I think, but if there's a conscious engagement with it, whether that's more head on or maybe more, I don't know, kind of around the periphery. I think that's where I kind of want to see the shift, in the way that we
Yeah.
do things here in the United States, at least.
Yeah. I guess you, since you felt so alone in the whole thing, right? You would like to provide a space for people to realize that they're not alone, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you know, I've been into A Course in Miracles for a while now.
Right.
And in A Course in Miracles, one of the statements is, you are never alone.
Yeah.
And healing is always something that more than one people are benefiting from. So we're healing together. There's never a healing that happens for one person alone,
Right.
which is a
Yeah.
very, very significant when it comes to dealing with these experiences of someone you experienced as a body, right? And as a person you interact with, and then the body is gone, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is left? And in A Course in Miracles, one says that we are not the body.
Mm.
And one of the statements is, I am not a body, I am free, I am as God created me. What would you say to that?
That's beautiful. I mean, it's interesting. It's the I am not a body. I don't know. That's an interesting thing to think about, because being a dancer and a choreographer and someone who is very passionate about embodied practice as a way to connect to the spiritual and to connect to the self and identity. Like I'm very much of the mind that our whole being, at least when we're alive, our whole being is connected physically and spiritually, and everything is all one unit. And when we acknowledge it as one unit is actually when we're, I think, living more holistically, and connected to each other and to ourselves. But that being said, the body does decay, the body does go away, the body dies, and our essence and the core of who we are, I think, remains. So I would say, yes, I agree with that. But with the caveat that I think the body is really important when it is living and we are inhabiting it. It is, this beautiful vessel that we are gifted, and can help guide us,
Yeah.
in space and time.
Yeah. And in A Course in Miracles, the body's only function is for communication.
Mm.
So it's not, the body is not the cause. The cause is in the mind, and that's what it's communicating. And it's also a learning device.
Yeah.
So, and yes, we are not the body. Nonetheless, as long as we are in what A Course in Miracles says is a dream, right? Or a projection, our projection of the belief in separation. In order to return, we need to acknowledge communication as the means of joining once again with who we are, right?
Yeah.
And that obviously the body is one of the main tools of the world, right? As long as we are in the dream to wake up.
Mm. Yeah. Well, and the body is such a powerful communication tool. I mean, not just not in its just in its ability to, to make sound and words and communicate in that way, but also, thinking about body language, thinking about dance, thinking about, physical, the ways we physically connect with each other and communicate with each other is, it really, it goes beyond words, and it can say so much and connect or divide. It's such a powerful level, right? Like
Yes.
physical violence versus physical, love, um,
Yeah.
as being the two extremes of how the body can communicate to such an intense degree, to connect or divide us.
Yeah. So that's what A Course in Miracles is also speaking about, the choice. You have the choice to choose whether you are calling for love, which is, can be violence, can be mean words, whatever, right? Or you are expressing love directly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the ways, means to forgive each other as well, because you see that when someone else is, and when one of the other bodies, so to speak, that are, we're not really separate, but in that you may perceive it that way, that if something is happening that is annoying or whatever, you can see it as a call for love,
Mm.
rather than being angry at them, and joining in calling for love as well.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I really resonate with the idea, the connectedness, um, because I don't know, I've really been feeling, in these very tumultuous times, especially in this country where we're not just dealing with the pandemic, but we're reckoning with racial violence. We're looking at an upcoming election. There's wildfires. Like, it's just month after month, some other disaster is hitting this country, and I there's so much fear and there's so much violence and there's so much hurt and so much, um, yeah, struggle that's happening right now on a massive collective level.
Yeah.
And I, even if I'm just, by myself in my apartment or in my house, or, or just with people that I feel safe with or connected to, I I am feeling the anxiety and the fear of I'm feeling the weight of everything that's happening outside. Um, and I think it's because we are connected that you can't shut yourself away. At least if you're listening and paying attention and are really noticing, the resonance and vibration, um, and really believe in that connectedness and are aware of it, you can't avoid it then.
Yeah. Yeah. we
It's
are we are one. In A Course in Miracles, it says we actually share the same mind,
mm,
which is very interesting when you think of how many of us think that what we are thinking, we're the only ones thinking it, right?
right, right,
When in reality, that's impossible.
right. Well,
You,
and that's, I think, exactly what I'm trying to do, very specifically to grief and death, but I think it's true with everything. That is, how do we remind ourselves and remind each other and connect on the fact that we do all share these thoughts and these experiences, and
yeah,
that we're none of us are alone, and there's such power in finding that community and realizing you're not alone.
yeah, indeed. Yeah. Well, what do you say to the expression, the the kingdom of heaven is within?
Hmm. I think it's I think for me that it's the potential, right? Like, the kingdom of heaven is within, but we are so prone to, or I am, or the people that I see around me are so prone to muddling it up and covering it up and hiding it and ignoring it, right? I think it's how do we shed the misconceptions and the cloudiness and the darkness and the fear and all of that to really live that as a truth.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge.
Yeah. And of course, in Miracles, it says to remove the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. That's the purpose that the Holy Spirit that is, or the Christ that is within each and every one of us has, right? That's what
Yeah.
we're supported with from within when we allow it, when we choose to allow it.
Yeah.
And supporting each other when you recognize the Christ in each other, or the love, or the truth, right? We are strengthening that. And it's the only way to actually see it for oneself as well, by seeing it in each other.
Right.
And,
exactly.
And that means really learning to see past these blocks and allowing them to dissolve.
Yeah. And that's such a hard thing to do, because I think sometimes you get comfortable in whatever you're used to, or whatever you've been doing for a long time. I think sometimes, people get stuck and trapped in their traumas, or in their defense mechanisms, or in their blocks, because it's all that they've known. And it takes an act of courage. It takes courage, and it takes determination, and it takes faith, to choose to step out of that, to walk a new path, to let go of all of that. And yeah, I think exactly. I think the way to do that is in the connection with others. When you see another, you can step into their presence, right? It's a way to step out of all these things that you're holding on to.
Yeah, we are each other's saviors, according to A Course in Miracles, and I think that is very true, because when we can see the Savior in each other, we are actually seeing ourselves as saved. Yeah. And another expression is, in defenselessness our safety lies.
Can you say that again? Sorry, I missed.
In defenselessness, I don't know how to say it. Defenselessness our safety lies.
Defenselessness or safety lies. Yeah, and it's so funny. It's like it's so counterintuitive to what we're taught in schools, and what we're taught by our society, right?
Exactly, it's the opposite.
To be safe and put up the walls, and get your weapons and hide behind, and be ready to attack and defend. And it's in the vulnerability. It's in the. I mean, that's exactly when I made my show. I think initially I wasn't going to include my personal story or my personal altars. I wanted to make it a space for others, but I realized that one of the best ways that I could connect with others is to be vulnerable myself, to show my vulnerability, to accompany them, and share that we are not alone together, right? And yeah, vulnerability is exactly it. It's when you let those walls come down, and you are fully, authentically yourself. That's when the big things happen. That's when the healing occurs. That's when the beauty really shines through.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, It also speaks of how we are innocent and we are holy, and that we are perfect, right? And what we all have in common is to want to be perfectly happy, and that is our right to be perfectly happy. So to claim our right also demands this total authenticity, right? That we were just speaking about.
Well, and just to imagine, if everybody on the planet really embraced this, what a what a changed world it would be. What a more beautiful and caring and loving world it would be,
Yeah,
if we all could really acknowledge that we're connected and that we have this purity and goodness and light inside of us,
yeah,
and see it in each other, not just inside of us, but in each other.
exactly. That's really important. Yeah, and the Course in Miracles speaks of the forgiven world in the context of this, and
Mm-hmm.
how beautiful that is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. So this is really important work to allow ourselves to see each other for who we are, no
Yeah.
matter what defenses may be appearing or coming up, right? And appearing to be real, right? They are not. They don't need to be in the way of seeing the love, the joy, the innocence, the holiness, and how
Yeah.
we are all infinitely valuable and safe.
Mm-hmm. How do you remind yourself of that kind of on a daily basis in your life?
Yeah, well, I've been sharing about A Course in Miracles for a long time, and that helps me to recognize that. And if I'm in a not so happy space myself, then I will just reflect on that by asking the questions that are coming to mind, and gaining perspective on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that helps me to focus on this shift, right? To choose again. Of course, in Miracles it says, just choose again. If you chose wrongly, right, or not wrongly, but you chose fear, right,
Yeah.
then you can choose again. You can choose love.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly it. I think, um, we're society teaches us that, you know, we're locked in to our choices in some ways, right? That you're just kind of bound to from one thing to the next, and that's the freedom. The freedom is acknowledging that, yeah, you can always choose again. You can always make a different choice. You can always shift.
Exactly.
You're not locked in, and it doesn't matter how many years or how many months or how many days or how many hours you've been making one choice. It's never too late. It's never too late, and it can be constant. You can constantly continue to choose um, love.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the very important choice when it comes to the grieving process,
Yeah.
is choosing love again and again and again,
Yeah.
and and to suppress what's going on certainly isn't a loving choice, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. I think it's, yeah, choosing love for yourself and love for those around you and love for those who've died. It's that is, yeah, that is the way through. And when you love someone, when you truly love someone, uh, you allow them to be themselves, and you allow them to express what they need to express, and you sit there with them. You accompany them in their experience. That's, to me, that's what love looks like. um, I find, though, that the challenge is to express that same compassion and love to the self, um,
Exactly. Yeah.
as well as to the other. I think sometimes it's easier to see how we can do it for others, but then when we turn to ourselves, we, are get harder on ourselves, or choose other things, other ways of interacting rather than love. And yeah, I think for grief, it's, you have to just be present with it and let it be what it is, and not force it to be anything in particular, or to push past it or repress it, but to just experience it, authentically experience it, vulnerably experience it with love and with compassion and with community.
Yeah. And to be, yeah, like you said, be present with it. And whatever it is at that moment, right?
Yeah.
And that can shift in the very next moment. But in that moment,
Exactly.
it's okay.
Exactly. And it shifts a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the other thing that I really push back against is there's this idea. I mean, again, from the perspective that I've experienced, in this country, and kind of the Western perspective, but there's this idea that there's a timeline, there's this idea that you go through these organized stages, and then you complete the process, and then you're at the other end and it's over and you move on, right? And it's totally not how it works.
Yeah.
like there is no end point. It's we stay connected, and we continue to process the physical loss of someone for the rest of our lives, and certainly the maybe the intensity rises and falls and maybe is stronger at the beginning, but there is no timeline, and there aren't, the stages are not, everyone goes through them differently. I mean, certainly we're all connected, and we all, as you said, of one mind. We all experience them, but we don't all experience them in the same way or in the same order. And yeah, it rises and falls, and it's unpredictable, and it really just needs to do what it needs to do, like.
Yeah. And it's also, we have these ideas of what it means when someone dies, right?
Right.
What should have happened, or how it should have been, or what are, and then one of the main things is also all the communications we had with these people, right? And then you start thinking about them, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
how you would have preferred them to be, or what you would have preferred to have said, or what you would still want to say or communicate. And in A Course in Miracles, it also says the relationship remains. The person,
Right.
you remain connected, because we all are one, and the connection isn't lost because the body has faded or gone, right? There's still
Right.
the connection, so we still can communicate, and we still can heal and forgive each other, even past the time of a physical body.
Right.
And I think that's one of the discoveries you make once you are moving in it, right? That you actually still can communicate and heal.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even in psychology, I mean, one of the things I wrote about is there's this idea called continuing bonds, and it's exactly that idea that, well, maybe a little less spiritual because it's it's in the field of psychology, but the idea is that you find a way to continue the relationship with the person even after they've died, and that there are ways to do that, and that's how we reintegrate them into our lives and move forward. Not move on, but move forward. Yeah, I mean, the other thing is, the idea of the way that things should have happened. One of the things that I wrote about in my thesis was this term the good death. And it's this term that's kind of thrown around in a lot of contexts, but also especially in the medical field, of like what is a good death, and that there's certain, this is the way that people should die, and these are all the kinds of things that need to happen for it to be a good death. And I really challenge that term. While of course, you know, it's beautiful when a death occurs peacefully and when everyone has been reconciled and everyone gets to say goodbye. Like there's this kind of idealized, you get to do all these things. And of course, it's not to say that that's not a good and beautiful thing, but I think I challenge the term because calling it a good death to me then makes other deaths bad deaths, and creates this dichotomy and this, bifurcation and division. And I think that's really challenging because if, most people are not going to experience someone having a good death. Most people are, their loved one's going to die in some way where they feel like maybe not everything got solved, or even maybe the death was sudden or violent, or, there's so many other ways that people die. And then if we like hold on to that as this a negative thing, it's so hard then to heal and to process and to reintegrate and to have that continuing bond, if you're looking at it through this negative lens. So I think what I was really arguing for is, what if we just accepted death as death, and that it's, it's not good or bad, it is the way that it happens, and that we can come to terms with whatever that reality is and acknowledge it as that was the ending of that chapter, but of that physical chapter anyway, but that we can really keep going from there and integrate it in and process it and acknowledge it as just being exactly what it is, which is the end of that physical chapter. And that was just the way that the Vias is right, which is sometimes challenging to say when it's something that seems negative or chaotic or whatever, but it happened the way that it happened. And now, like, what do we do next? I think that's like, how do we continue our relationship? How do we process? How do we forgive? How do we reconnect? How do we love? And how do we, and then also just not putting pressure on death and dying, that, we do the best that we can to, of course, love and connect and forgive, on this side, while we're alive. And if someone is dying of natural causes, to, of course, do the best we can to make them comfortable and peaceful and to achieve this quote unquote good death, but without the pressure, I think, to let it really be what it is and to accept it.
Yeah. I have the feeling also when you have a lot of stowed up, unsolved issues with a person, the grieving can be even more intense.
Yeah. Well, and also more likely to avoid it, right? If
true, yeah.
If it's complicated and multi-layered. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and then these self-attacks can be take on many different forms, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the greatest blocks to actually accepting the things the way they are.
Right.
Because you just can't see them for what they are, because you're so into this having grievances.
Yeah, and so clouded by the negativity and the lack of self-compassion, and also
I mean, you can project all the guilt onto the person who died, of course, but it won't help you because you will be feeling miserable.
Right. Well, yeah, it's you can't projection doesn't actually remove it from yourself.
Exactly.
It just amplifies it. I mean, even like a physical, I mean, I'm a projection artist, so of course I'm thinking of like even the physical device of a projector, right? You know,
Yeah.
where you plug it in this and it's bouncing the light off, the screen or the wall or whatever, and it's, just because it's on the wall, it doesn't mean it's not also in the projector itself and in the device. That's where it's coming from. It doesn't actually get rid of it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why the world does not get projecting all your guilt onto. And according to A Course in Miracles, the world is a projection of guilt. So forgiveness is the way to wake up from this dream. And so that's why it feels so good to forgive, right?
Right. I've heard a lot of people saying recently, it's like, oh, yes, I'm good at forgiving, but I'm not good at forgetting.
Yeah.
But no, it's, yeah. No, exactly. It's the forgiveness, and not just of the other, forgiveness of self. I think that's a big one. I think, again, all the things that we do for the other, we should do for ourselves as well. Because we are all connected, and if we're just helping the other and just loving the other and forgiving the other, but not totally doing the opposite to ourselves or ignoring ourselves, it's not really healing. It's not really forgiving. It's you're missing half of the picture. And it's, if you keep it pent up and blocked up in yourself, you're contributing to our collective challenge and struggle. If we're all connected, then it's in the best interest of all of us to love ourselves and each other.
Yeah, well, loving each other is the way home, right? Mm-hmm. So when we are seeing each other as the optimal way of expressing love, right? We actually can walk each other home, as A Course in Miracles says. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we're always together. It's always something we're doing together.
Right. Accompanying each other on the journey.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And would you like to share something else that I didn't think of asking?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot. Yeah, I think especially what we're talking about here at the end is exactly it. That, that's the work that I'm trying to do, and am going to do going forward, is exactly that, is how can we come together and accompany each other with love and compassion and vulnerability and unity as we face the hardest moments of our lives. And yeah, I think if more people believe these things, or accepted these realities, and chose to love each other intentionally, and take down those be defenseless, take down the walls, our world would be such a better place. yeah, but yeah, that's the idea of accompanying it. That's exactly what I'm trying to do with my art, is accompany others, um, and leave room for them to accompany each other, and to feel safe and held and love in their grief. And so, yeah, I'm it's hard work, and I have my own struggles, and I in some ways I feel like there's a lot of my own grief that I haven't fully processed, or continue to process, continue to come to terms with, that my own regrets and my own emotions and all those things, especially as I keep losing people, and what does it look like to have these continued relationships and continuing bonds with them. So um, yeah, it's a choice every day, every moment, to engage from this perspective, rather than from a place of fear or avoidance, or uh, aloneness.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yes. So how do you deal with this, knowing that losses do occur, people do separate or go apart, or change habitats and stop living near to each other and this and that? How do you bond with them anyways, knowing that this is possible?
Yeah. um I mean, I think a big part of that answer for me is my artistic practice. That's the way that I can continue to honor and bond and connect with any part of my past, whether it's people who have died, or people who are just far away, or even parts of we also grieve parts of ourselves, or grieve our past lives and experiences.
Yeah.
It's there's every moment is a new moment. Every moment you're in some ways grieving the moment that just passed, and all of the moments before that. And so I think, yeah, a huge, I mean, even building those altars in my show, um, for me was a huge, I really felt like I was bonding, with those three people that I had lost. The altar for my grandmother, I had this blank notebook and a projector on top of it, and I had filmed myself writing. I wrote down, in the last like 8 days of her life, on my phone I wrote down all of the things that she said. Not all of the things, but just kind of phrases and remarks and little statements that she made.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was building my installation, I recorded a video of myself handwriting out all those phrases in this notebook, and then dating it and saying, giving a context of this was 3 days before she died, or 5 days before she died. And then I reprojected that video of my hand writing these phrases onto the blank notebook in the show, this kind of disembodied hand. And it was interlaced with some pictures of her and a video of me dancing at her memorial service and all these things. And yeah, as I was making it, even as it was just, I'd completed, making the show and it was there, I really felt that she was there in those words, and in she was very present in this disembodied projection notebook thing that I'd made. But I kind of actually forgot what the initial question was. Oh, how to continue bonding. But yeah, so artistic practice. I mean, that's, yeah, a lot of my ways of connecting is through artistic practice. But the other way, I also think that thinking, I mean, even just thinking about them, or reminisce, remembering moments, or telling stories to other people, connecting with other people who knew them or know them, um, is another way of really staying present,
Yeah.
with them for me. And then for, it's, I try to stay actually, connected and bonded to people who are just far away. Um, Whenever I can, I try to, connect digitally, etc. Um, but yeah, finding them in myself, in my own expression, whether that's storytelling or art making, or just being in my own mind, remembering, or and also just keeping my eyes open, my eyes and ears open. Sometimes I just go out and I look at a flower and then I'm reminded, or I smell something and I'm reminded, or I hear something, or hear a piece of music, or um, yeah, I think it's everywhere. You just have to pay attention. Like,
Okay.
just really be aware.
Yeah. Yeah, because that could be when we have this time where things like shutdown or lockdown or whatever are all there, right?
Yeah.
And people have felt very lonely lately.
Yeah.
And so the practices that you've developed or discovered to keep bonding, and feeling safe and connected are very important in these times, especially, or once again, even more important, right? They always have
Yeah.
been important, but they take on a new significance.
Yeah. Well, and also I think it's, again, what you said before, what we've talked about a lot on this call, but um, by connecting with other people, or making space for other people, or loving other people, that's also, it reflects back to us, that we gain some of that love and connection and healing through that process too. I think, um, by making space for other people's grief, I feel like I also made space for my own,
Yes,
you
indeed.
know,
Yeah.
by, so that kind of thing too is, I think, the other strategy, especially if I'm feeling alone or isolated, or like I'm struggling, then if I try to find someone else who is struggling and try to be present for them and accompany them in their experience, um, that also refuels me.
Yeah,
Um,
indeed.
so that's, yeah, reaching out to the other, and helping the other, I think is also very powerful. And um, I mean, it's amazing. It's we're all shut down and isolated and all of that right now. But I think also I'm so grateful for technology. I'm so grateful for the video conferencing, and for the phones and the internet, and all the ways that we can still stay connected. And this is a great time. Well, not a great. All to say that for this to occur at a time when we have these kinds of resources, again, I don't think it's the via is recht, right? Like, if we have to go through this international, worldwide moment of having to stay at home, and come to terms with what's going on, um, I'm so grateful that it's at a time when we have the tools and resources to stay connected.
Yeah.
I mean, even the fact that you and I are talking right now, across the ocean.
Yeah. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and we are sharing this with everyone who will be listening to the recording.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's wonderful to be able to connect internationally, and across borders, and across countries, and across oceans, to remind each other that we are also spiritually connected. We're not just connected digitally.
Exactly.
We're connected by, physically all being on the same globe, but that, we share an energy, we share the spirit.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so beautiful to be able to walk each other home.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'll say thank you to you, Beatrice, for joining me in this endeavor to be truly helpful to everyone who is interested or wants to become interested or whatever, because this is a topic that is important to all of us. In one way or another, there are things that we will be letting go of. And even if it's just a moment before the moment
Yeah.
we're in now.
Yeah.
So,
Well, thank you. I thank you for having me and for asking me. This has been a wonderful. I've learned so much from this conversation too, and then reminded of the things that I believe in, and reminded of the truths of our reality, and our connection, and also wonderful to connect with my brother
yeah,
from across the ocean, after many years. And yeah, I really hope that you and I can stay connected, but also that everyone, listening to this, that we really strive to walk each other home, to be together, to love each other, to choose every moment, every day, choose love, um, and accompany each other through the hardest times.
yeah, and to open up to the joy that is available to us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you once again, Beatrice,
Well, thank you.
and thank you to all the listeners. And till next time, bye bye.
Bye.